They stole India's inventions and took all the credit. Somewhere in a dusty European museum, a plaque proudly credits an ancient invention to the wrong civilization, and almost nobody visiting that museum today has any idea the truth was quietly rewritten centuries ago. This is not a rare accident. It is a pattern repeated again and again across history, involving one nation whose remarkable achievements were absorbed, renamed, and claimed by empires that once ruled over it. That nation is India, a civilization that quietly gifted the world some of its most important tools, ideas, and technologies, only to watch its own name slowly disappear from the story it helped write. For generations, students around the world have been taught a version of history that conveniently skips over India's true contributions, crediting instead the empires that later absorbed, translated, and rebranded these achievements as their own. This is the story of what was truly taken, how it happened, and why the truth is finally beginning to resurface after centuries of silence. By the time this story reaches its conclusion, you will understand exactly why so many historians now describe this quiet correction of the record as one of the most important cultural reckonings of our modern era, decades in the making, and still very much unfolding today. Let us begin with an idea so essential to modern life that almost nobody stops to consider where it actually came from: the number zero itself. Every piece of modern technology, from the simplest calculator to the most advanced supercomputer, depends entirely on a digit representing nothing, yet capable of transforming everything. This concept was not born in Europe. It was carefully developed and mathematically defined in ancient India, largely through the groundbreaking work of the mathematician Brahmagupta, who established clear rules for treating zero as a genuine number rather than a simple placeholder. The idea eventually traveled westward through the Arab world, absorbed into what history books later labeled Arabic numerals, a name that conveniently erased any mention of the civilization where the concept truly originated. Scholars tracing this journey describe a clear chain of transmission from original Indian mathematical texts through the great centers of learning in Baghdad and finally into medieval European universities where the true source was rarely acknowledged by name at all. Without this single Indian contribution, modern mathematics, computing, and engineering simply would not exist in any recognizable form today. Every smartphone in every pocket, every satellite orbiting overhead, and every line of software code running quietly in the background of daily life ultimately traces its mathematical foundation back to a single concept first fully understood in ancient India. Yet walk into classrooms across the world, and India's name rarely appears anywhere near this foundational story. But this erasure was only the beginning of a much larger pattern. Consider next the field of medicine, specifically the delicate and highly skilled art of plastic surgery, widely assumed to be a modern European invention. In truth, the foundational techniques of reconstructive surgery were carefully documented in ancient India over 2,000 years ago through the detailed medical writings of the physician Susruta. His texts described precise surgical methods for reconstructing damaged noses, ears, and other tissue, techniques so advanced that visiting European surgeons centuries later reportedly expressed genuine astonishment upon witnessing them performed. Rather than properly crediting this ancient Indian medical tradition, the modern Western medical establishment largely absorbed these techniques, publishing research and building professional reputations upon knowledge that had already existed on Indian soil for 2,000 years. Medical historians who have carefully compared original Sanskrit medical texts against later European publications describe striking similarities in both technique and terminology, similarities that make the true chain of influence remarkably difficult to honestly deny once properly examined.
Susruta's name remains almost entirely absent from mainstream medical education today, despite standing as one of the true founding figures of surgical science. Physicians who have studied his original writings closely often describe genuine surprise at the sophistication of his methods, noting techniques for tissue grafting that would not reappear anywhere in Western medical literature for well over 1,000 years afterward. This single omission changed how the entire world understood the history of medicine.
Yet the true story remains largely unknown outside specialized academic circles. Now stay with this story, because the next example touches something nearly everyone on Earth has personally held: the timeless game of chess. Widely celebrated as a European intellectual tradition, chess actually traces its authentic origins back to ancient India, where it was originally known as Chaturanga, a strategic war game representing 4 divisions of an ancient army. The game slowly traveled through Persia, then through the broader Islamic world, and eventually reached Europe, transforming along the way while still retaining its original Indian strategic structure and philosophy. By the time chess reached European royal courts, its true Indian origins had already been quietly stripped away, replaced instead with a narrative crediting Persian and later European innovation almost entirely. Board designs, piece names, and even much of the strategic vocabulary used by professional grandmasters today all carry faint but unmistakable echoes of that original Sanskrit game. Echoes most players today have simply never been told to listen for. Even today, most casual players around the world remain completely unaware that the game occupying countless hours of their lives began not in Europe, but in the ancient villages and royal courts of India. Historians studying original Sanskrit texts describe strategic rules for Chaturanga that closely resemble the same logic still used by professional grandmasters today. Clear evidence that the underlying intellectual foundation of the game was already complete in India long before it ever touched European soil. But no one expected the next revelation to carry quite this much historical weight, because it involves the very metal that helped shape human civilization itself: steel. Long before European industry mastered advanced metallurgy, skilled Indian craftsmen were already producing something called Wootz steel, a remarkably strong and flexible metal prized throughout the ancient world for its exceptional quality and durability. This steel eventually traveled to the Middle East, where it became the essential foundation of what the world now famously calls Damascus steel, renowned for producing blades of extraordinary strength and beauty. For centuries, historians credited Middle Eastern blacksmiths entirely for this remarkable achievement, while the original Indian metallurgical tradition that made the entire process possible quietly faded into the background of recorded history. Modern metallurgists, using advanced laboratory analysis, have since confirmed the distinctive carbon nanostructures found within original Wootz steel samples, offering clear physical proof that the underlying science genuinely originated on Indian soil, regardless of how it was later credited. This discovery fundamentally changed the historical understanding of ancient industrial capability. Yet the full story still remains largely absent from popular retellings of world history. Museums across the world continue displaying Damascus steel blades as masterpieces of Middle Eastern craftsmanship, often without a single mention that the raw material making such craftsmanship possible originally traveled there directly from Indian furnaces centuries earlier. But the real story runs even deeper into the world of everyday objects people use constantly without ever questioning their true origin. Buttons, now an entirely unremarkable part of daily clothing across the globe, first appeared as functional fasteners within the Indus Valley civilization, thousands of years before similar innovations emerged anywhere else on Earth. Cotton cultivation and the sophisticated art of fabric dyeing, techniques that eventually built entire European textile industries and generated enormous colonial wealth, originated and flourished in India long before European merchants arrived seeking to control and profit from that same knowledge. The fine cotton fabric known worldwide as calico takes its very name from Calicut,
a coastal city in India. Yet the European trading companies that grew immensely wealthy exporting it rarely credited the sophisticated Indian textile tradition responsible for such remarkable quality. Skilled weaving techniques passed down carefully across generations of Indian artisans produced fabrics so fine and durable that early European traders initially struggled to replicate them, relying instead on continued import rather than any genuine innovation of their own making. Entire European fortunes were quietly built upon techniques extracted, rebranded, and eventually sold back to the very world that had never properly credited their true origin in the first place. Trading companies kept meticulous records of profits and shipments across centuries, yet almost none of those same detailed records bothered documenting the generations of skilled Indian artisans whose inherited knowledge made the entire enterprise possible from the very start. Now here comes the twist that connects every single one of these individual stories into one undeniable, unmistakable pattern. This was never simply a matter of historical oversight or accidental forgetting spread randomly across centuries. Throughout centuries of colonial rule, there existed a clear and deliberate pattern of extracting Indian knowledge across mathematics, medicine, metallurgy, and manufacturing, while simultaneously working to diminish India's own reputation as a genuine source of innovation. Colonial narratives frequently portrayed India as a land requiring outside civilization and improvement, a convenient framing that ignored substantial evidence proving India had already developed remarkably advanced knowledge systems centuries earlier than most of Europe. This distortion was not accidental. It served a clear political purpose, justifying continued colonial rule by presenting the colonized as intellectually inferior, even while quietly absorbing and profiting from the very achievements that directly contradicted that convenient narrative. Manuscripts were translated without proper attribution to their original authors. Scholars were systematically written out of official history books, and innovations that took centuries to carefully develop on Indian soil were repeatedly rebranded, repackaged, and presented to the wider world as achievements belonging to someone else entirely. Textbooks distributed widely across colonized territories reinforced this exact same narrative for generations, teaching countless Indian children an incomplete version of their own history that quietly minimized their ancestors' genuine and remarkable contributions to global human progress. This deliberate pattern explains precisely why so many people today remain genuinely unaware of India's true and extensive contributions to human progress, not because those contributions were ever small, but because the honest record was systematically obscured across many generations. But stay until the very end, because the final part of this story offers something far more hopeful than the pattern of erasure that came before it. In recent decades, historians, researchers, and scholars from around the world have finally begun the slow, painstaking work of correcting this historical record, carefully revisiting original texts, tracing authentic origins, and restoring proper credit to the civilizations that first developed these transformative ideas. Indian scholars and academic institutions have taken an increasingly active role in this important effort, publishing fresh research, digitizing ancient manuscripts, and consistently pushing for greater recognition within international academic and scientific communities. Slowly, patiently, the true and complete story is finally being told, not as a bitter complaint against the past, but as an honest and long overdue historical correction. International academic conferences increasingly feature Indian researchers presenting fresh, original evidence, and gradually mainstream publications outside India have begun quietly updating their own references to reflect this more accurate and far more complete historical picture. This matters far beyond simple historical accuracy alone. It matters because a nation's confidence in its own future is often built directly on a clear and honest understanding of its own remarkable past.
For far too long, generations of Indian students grew up learning an incomplete version of world history that quietly diminished their own civilization's genuine role in shaping global human progress. Young people today,
with access to information and original sources their grandparents never had, are increasingly discovering this fuller history for themselves, sharing it widely, and openly refusing to accept the incomplete versions that once went entirely unquestioned in classrooms worldwide. Now, that flawed narrative is finally beginning to shift, one carefully restored fact at a time, one properly credited discovery at a time. India never simply inherited greatness from outside forces or foreign benefactors. It built genuine greatness entirely from within, across mathematics, medicine, metallurgy, and countless other fields, often centuries before those same ideas eventually reached the rest of the world. The world quietly borrowed from India far more than it has ever openly admitted, and the careful correction of that historical record is now, finally, rightfully underway. Every restored name, every properly cited manuscript, and every corrected museum placard represents a small but genuinely meaningful victory in a much larger effort to ensure future generations inherit a truthful account of who actually built the modern world, piece by careful piece. This is not simply a story about ancient inventions or long-forgotten scholars. It is the story of a civilization reclaiming its rightful place within the broader history of human achievement. It is the story of a nation whose brilliance was never actually missing at all, only deliberately hidden from the credit it always genuinely deserved. Every generation now carries a small but meaningful responsibility to learn this fuller history honestly, to share it widely, and to ensure no future child ever grows up believing their own ancestors contributed nothing significant to the modern world they now live in. And as more of this true history steadily comes to light, one undeniable truth becomes impossible to ignore any longer. India was never simply a follower in the grand story of human progress and innovation. It was, time and time again, quietly and brilliantly, the very origin point that the rest of the world eventually built upon, whether that world has ever been fully ready to admit it or not. From the mathematics that quietly power every modern computer, to the medical techniques that still guide surgeons in operating rooms today, to the ancient metallurgy that once shaped weapons and tools across entire continents, the fingerprints of Indian innovation remain woven into nearly every corner of modern life, whether properly acknowledged or not. The old narrative that quietly erased India's contributions is finally giving way to a fuller, far more honest telling of history, one where India's name finally sits exactly where it always rightfully belonged, at the very beginning of some of humanity's greatest achievements. And that, more than any single invention or discovery, stands as the true and lasting legacy this ancient civilization has always deserved to be remembered for. For every scholar whose name quietly faded from the historical record, and for every generation taught only an incomplete version of their own remarkable history, this long overdue moment of correction has finally, rightfully arrived. The story of India's true contributions to human civilization was never actually lost forever. It was only waiting, patiently and quietly, for the rest of the world to finally take the time to look closely enough to see it clearly for exactly what it always was.